Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. One of our listeners sent in some fascinating material by Prof. Yang, and, well, just had to dive into it. It's all about this idea of contentment, true life contentment.
It's a big one, isn't it? I mean, in a world that's always telling us what we should want, what we need to buy, what we have to achieve to be happy, Prof. Yang kind of flips the script and makes us think about what really satisfies us deep down.
Totally. And we have like a double whammy of content here. We have Prof. Yang's own notes, full of personal stories and reflections. But we also have this separate outline he put together that tackles contentment from a biblical perspective. It's a pretty cool mix. So what we're going to do today is unpack all of that, try to understand what Prof. Yang is getting at, and hopefully help you, our listener, walk away with a fresh perspective on how to find that genuine sense of contentment in your own life without, feeling like you're constantly chasing the next thing.
Right, because that chase never really ends, does it?
Yep. Exactly. And Prof. Yang starts off strong. He throws out this question right off the bat, and I think it's one we all need to ask ourselves. Are you satisfied with your current life? And the real kicker is the why or why not that follows.
Yeah, because it forces you to go deeper than just a surface level yes or no.
Totally. And from there, Prof. Yang goes into what usually pops into our heads when we think about a satisfying life. It's the usual suspects, right? Financial security, good work-life balance, close relationships, maybe some material comforts.
If things we're all kind of conditioned to strive for.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. Prof. Yang points out that even when we check off all those boxes, there can still be this nagging sense that something's missing, like we're not quite living in full color.
Yeah, not living out life's colors. I like that. He actually uses that phrase.
He does. It's super evocative. And it makes you wonder if our typical definition of a good life, a satisfying life, it's kind of, well, superficial.
Like we're just skimming the surface of what it really means to be content.
Absolutely. And then he brings in this story. It's about an airplane pilot.
Okay, a pilot.
Yeah.
How does that tie into contentment?
Well, this pilot has achieved what many would consider like the ultimate dream job.
Yeah.
He's flying high above the world, right? But as he's looking down at this beautiful lake, he doesn't feel this sense of accomplishment. Instead, he gets hit with this wave of longing for his childhood.
Really?
Yeah, like he remembers simpler times, fishing in that lake, and he actually yearns for those days.
So even achieving a lifelong dream, this incredible feat of flying, didn't actually lead to contentment.
It's like this ironic twist. He achieves this amazing thing, and yet his heart is pulling him back to something simpler, something he maybe took for granted before. So this is a question for you, our listener. Have you ever felt that? Have you achieved something you thought would bring you ultimate happiness, but then it just wasn't what you expected?
It's a good question to ponder because it makes you realize that maybe happiness and contentment aren't just about checking off achievements.
Right, it's deeper than that. And then Prof. Yang shares another story. This one is really short, but it's powerful. It's about these two tears that meet in a lake.
Two tears. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So one tear is from a woman who's been left by her lover, right? And the other tear is from the new woman in his life.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is.
Yeah.
And the question that kind of hangs in the air between these two tears is just this simple, not satisfied.
Ah, I see. So it's implying that even the woman who's supposedly in the desirable position, the one who is chosen, she might not be truly happy either.
Exactly. And Prof. Yang's question makes you think, right, like maybe the pursuit itself held more joy than the actual outcome. Or maybe both women would have found more happiness in a completely different situation. It challenges this whole idea that getting what we think we want will automatically lead to fulfillment.
It definitely throws a wrench in our typical assumptions about happiness.
It really does. And to dig into this whole idea of searching, Prof. Yang brings in a really interesting reference. He talks about the lyrics from U2's "I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For."
Okay, U2. I mean, they're legends. They've achieved massive success, sold millions of albums. They've pretty much done it all.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Bono, the lead singer, he's still singing about searching. Even after all that, he hasn't found what he's looking for.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it speaks to this universal human experience. We achieve, we experience, we connect, but there's still this sense of longing, this feeling that something's missing.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what it is we're all ultimately searching for, right? So this leads Prof. Yang to this idea of what he calls the problem of unsatisfied hearts. He basically says that as humans, we're constantly trying to fill this inner void with external things.
I think we can all relate to that in some way, trying to find fulfillment in possessions, achievements, relationships.
Totally. And he uses this analogy of being extremely hungry. Like you're so hungry that you'll grab anything to eat without even thinking if it's good for you or if it'll actually satisfy you in the long run.
Oh, I get it. So he's saying that we're often so desperate for contentment, for happiness, that we reach for whatever's in front of us without really considering if it's what we truly need.
Exactly. And these quick fixes, they don't really address the root of the problem, do they?
No, they don't. They might provide temporary relief, but the underlying hunger remains. So where do we go from there? If these external things aren't the answer, then what is?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, because Professor Yang brings in a spiritual perspective. He suggests that this longing, this emptiness we feel, it's kind of baked into our very being. He says it stems from the fact that we're created in God's image, and therefore, earthly things can never fully satisfy that connection to the divine.
That's a pretty profound thought. It suggests that there's a deeper, more spiritual dimension to our search for contentment.
Right. And this brings us to the heart of the matter, the true meaning of contentment. Professor Yang points out that the New Testament was originally written in Greek, and the Greek word for contentment is autarkes.
Autarkes. That's a new one.
It is, right. And he breaks it down for us. It's not just about being content or satisfied, although those are part of it. It's also about being self-sufficient. He actually uses the example of a city that has all the resources it needs within its own walls.
Yeah.
Water, food, everything. It's this sense of inner security.
So it's not about relying on external factors for happiness. It's about having this inner strength, this ability to meet your own needs, regardless of what's happening outside.
Exactly. And get this, autarkies also means being independent or unaffected by external circumstances. Professor Yang even highlights how it was used in the context of, like, a siege. So imagine a city under siege, but the people inside, they remain strong and unyielding because they have everything they need within.
Wow, that paints a very different picture of contentment than what we usually think of. It's not this fragile thing that depends on everything going right. It's this unshakable inner fortitude that can withstand even the toughest challenges.
Right. And to really bring this home, Professor Yang turns to a specific passage in the Bible. It's from Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 4, verses 10 through 13. And what's really important here is the context. You see, these words were written by Paul while he was in prison.
Okay, so he's writing about contentment while he's literally imprisoned. That's powerful.
It is, right? Because you'd think that being in prison would be the ultimate test of contentment. But Paul, he expresses this deep joy and thankfulness, even in those circumstances. He says, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want.
So his contentment wasn't tied to his situation improving. It was something he had cultivated internally, regardless of his external circumstances.
Exactly. And that's what Professor Yang calls out, this idea that contentment is a learned ability. And it's not dependent on our situation, on good things happening to us. It's an internal state of being.
And from this passage, Professor Yang pulls out 4 key insights into how we can develop this kind of contentment.
Yeah, let's dive into those.
All right. So the first one is that contentment is a secret, a mystery. It's not something that's just obvious or easy to get. He even jokes about how some people think that after a big spiritual experience, boom, they'll automatically be content. But that's not how it works. It's more like a hidden code that we need to decipher.
And it makes you think, right, if contentment was easy, wouldn't everyone have it? But the fact that even someone like Paul in prison could find it, it really highlights that it's about something deeper than just having our circumstances line up perfectly.
Totally. And that leads to the second insight. Contentment requires learning. It's not a one-time thing. It's a process. We need to learn and grow into it. It's like any skill. You have to practice and cultivate it over time.
And I think that's encouraging in a way, because it means that even if we haven't mastered contentment yet, we can still learn and grow. It's an ongoing journey.
Exactly. The third insight is that contentment is independent of external circumstances. And this goes back to Paul's statement about being content whether he was well-fed or hungry, whether he had plenty or was in need. True contentment, it's not dictated by what's happening around us.
And, you know, thinking back to those U2 lyrics, maybe that's why they were still searching. They had all this external success, but maybe that wasn't where true contentment was found.
It's a good point. Maybe they were looking in the wrong place all along. And that brings us to the fourth and final insight. Contentment comes from within. And Professor Yang says that for those who believe, this inner source of contentment ultimately comes from Jesus Christ.
Yeah, he has this powerful line: contentment is not a formula, but a person Christ dwelling within. And he references Colossians 2:9-10, which talks about the fullness of God being in Christ and believers being complete in him.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of being or checking off all the right boxes. It's about this internal connection, this relationship with Christ that fills that void and brings true contentment.
It really shifts the focus from external accomplishments to something much deeper, doesn't it?
It does, and Professor Yang even adds a personal touch here. He shares that his own understanding of contentment has actually grown over time as he's gone through different seasons of life, experienced both highs and lows. And he contrasts this with the often idealistic views we have when we're younger.
He even includes some excerpts from Chinese poems about how, youthful sorrow can feel so big and all-consuming in the moment, but then you gain experience and perspective and you realize it was just a phase.
So it's like life itself, with all its twists and turns, actually teaches us about contentment.
Yeah, it's a journey, isn't it? And it might not be until later in life that we really start to grasp the depth of what true contentment is.
It's encouraging, though, because it means that even if we're not there yet, we're still on the path.
Absolutely. And Professor Yang ends this whole section by bringing us back to that core verse from Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He links this directly to the idea that Christ is the ultimate source of our strength and ultimately our contentment.
It's a powerful reminder that true contentment isn't something we achieve on our own. It's something we receive, something that flows from our connection with Christ.
So to sum up Professor Yang's deep dive into contentment, it's not about how much money we have or how many things we achieve, or even about having perfect circumstances. It's about this learned wisdom and inner strength and self-sufficiency that allows us to find peace and satisfaction regardless of what's happening around us. And for those who believe, this strength and contentment are found in Christ.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you, our listener, to ponder. Think about those mountains you've climbed, those metaphorical honey lips you've kissed in your own life, those things you've achieved, those experiences you've chased after. Have those things brought you lasting contentment? Or is there still a part of you that's searching? Maybe true contentment isn't about finding something out there. Maybe it's about cultivating that inner self-sufficiency, that strength that both Professor Yang and the Apostle Paul talk about. It's an invitation to turn inward, to explore that connection to something deeper, something that can truly satisfy the longings of our hearts.
And on that note, we'll leave you to dive deeper into these ideas on your own.
Until next time.
See you then.